The school bus pulled up that afternoon in 2005 like it always did. Children laughed, backpacks swung, and the same yellow doors hissed open at the same stop. But when the bus drove away, one girl was gone forever. She was last seen stepping off that bus. And from that moment on, her life, her future, her voice, vanished into silence. Police searched. Volunteers combed the woods. Flyers covered every store window. But there was no trace. No body. No answers. Just a family left to wonder what happened on that ordinary day. 18 years passed. Her mother kept her room exactly the same. The bed neatly made, posters still on the wall, homework folders left on her desk as if she would come back any moment. Her father, quiet and withdrawn, walked past the doorway every night, too afraid to step inside. Friends grew up, graduated, and moved away, but her picture stayed the same, forever frozen at 14. The town whispered. Some believed she had run away. Others said she must be dead. The case grew cold. It became just another unsolved mystery, locked away in old police files. But in 2023, everything changed. The FBI got a tip. It was the kind of call investigators never expected after so many years. Something about the voice on the other end of the line made them reopen the case. Something that couldn't be ignored. When agents followed the lead, they uncovered a truth no one was prepared for. A truth that rewrote everything the town thought they knew. Because she wasn't dead. She was alive. Hidden. Waiting. For nearly 2 decades she had been right there, closer than anyone imagined. And the person responsible was someone no one suspected. The FBI's discovery shook the town to its core. Families locked their doors. Neighbors looked at each other differently. Because if this could happen in their quiet community, if a girl could disappear in broad daylight from her school bus stop and remain unseen for 18 years, then what else could be happening right next door? This isn't just a story of a missing girl. It's a story of survival. Of secrets kept behind ordinary walls. Of a truth that was buried for nearly 2 decades until it clawed its way back into the light. And now we're going to walk through it, step by step. From that bus ride in 2005, to the years of silence, to the FBI's shocking breakthrough in 2023. What happened to the girl who never came home? And when the truth finally surfaced, was it a rescue, or another nightmare waiting to begin? The year was 2005, and in the quiet town of Millwood, life moved with a rhythm that felt unshakable. It was the sort of place where mornings began with church bells, afternoons echoed with children's laughter, and evenings ended on front porches with neighbors waving goodnight. Parents trusted that their kids were safe. The biggest worry was making it home before the streetlights blinked on. But that illusion of safety shattered one autumn afternoon. Her name was Hannah Parker. At 14, she balanced between childhood and the beginnings of independence. Teachers described her as diligent, quiet, always prepared. Friends remembered her kindness, how she shared gum on the bus, how she lent pencils to anyone who forgot theirs, how she never left without saying goodbye. She loved drawing in spiral notebooks, writing letters she never mailed, and listening to the same pop songs on her portable CD player. At home, Hannah was the heart of the family. She had an older brother, Caleb, already driving and convinced he ruled the household, and a younger sister, Sophie, who idolized her. Their mother, Janet, worked part-time at the library while their father, Greg, managed a hardware store downtown. They weren't wealthy, but their house carried warmth, cluttered with shoes by the door, dishes in the sink, laughter bouncing off every wall. To them, Hannah was steady, dependable, the one who never worried them. On October 12th, the day began as unremarkably as any other. Hannah dressed in her favorite pale blue hoodie, jeans slightly frayed at the knees, and sneakers she had begged for at the start of the school year. At breakfast, she asked her mother if she could go to a friend's house that weekend. Her mother said yes as long as homework came first. Hannah rolled her eyes but smiled anyway. At school, she sat through classes, joked with friends at lunch, and posed for a group picture in art club. Nobody thought twice about it. Nobody knew those ordinary moments would become fragments of her last known day. When the final bell rang, Hannah gathered her books and headed for bus 24, the same bus she had taken since elementary school. She slid into her usual seat near the middle, next to her friend Katie. They chatted about homework, about an upcoming dance, about nothing that seemed important at the time. Other students laughed, sang, shouted. The bus rolled forward, following the familiar route it had traveled countless times before. Stop after stop, children hopped off, running to waiting parents or disappearing down side streets. Hannah's stop sat at the corner of Pinewood Drive, a quiet stretch shaded by tall maples, their leaves turning golden in the October air. At 3:47 p.m., the doors hissed open. Hannah slung her backpack over one shoulder, waved goodbye to Katie and stepped onto the sidewalk. The driver, a woman who had known the Parker kids for years, later swore she saw Hannah walk a few paces down the block. And then the bus rumbled on, leaving her behind. That was the last confirmed moment anyone saw her. By 5 o'clock, when Hannah hadn't arrived home, Janet began to worry. At first, she thought her daughter had gone to a friend's without asking. She called Katie's house. No answer. She called another friend. Nothing. When Greg returned from work, he drove the route between school and their neighborhood, scanning sidewalks, playgrounds, and parks. But there was no sign of her. By 7, panic filled the Parker household. Neighbors joined the search, walking the streets with flashlights, calling her name. At 8, the police were notified. Officers arrived, canvassing houses, knocking on doors, questioning anyone who might have seen her. The bus driver repeated the same detail. Hannah had stepped off just like always. After that, she was gone. Helicopters hovered overhead. Search dogs followed her scent down Pinewood Drive until it vanished near a ditch along the road. Volunteers combed wooded trails, fields, and abandoned sheds. Flyers printed overnight plastered every storefront and lamppost. Hannah's smiling face stared out at a community that could not believe what had happened. Rumors began almost immediately. Some claimed a dark sedan had been spotted idling near the stop earlier that week. Others insisted Hannah had been seen walking toward the edge of town. A few whispered that she might have run away, though her parents dismissed the idea. She had left her allowance money, her favorite sketchbook, and even her CD player at home. The police questioned classmates, neighbors, and anyone with a history in the area. Dead ends piled up. Leads fizzled. Every hour that passed without answers deepened the fear. In those first days, Millwood changed. Parents began walking their kids to and from bus stops. Strangers eyed each other with suspicion. Doors once left unlocked were bolted tight. Hannah's disappearance cracked the town's sense of safety wide open. For the Parkers, the nightmare grew unbearable. Janet couldn't bring herself to enter Hannah's room, leaving the bed untouched, clothes folded neatly in drawers. Greg drove aimlessly after work, scanning roadsides, hoping for any sign. Caleb blamed himself for not walking his sister home. Sophie asked questions no parent knew how to answer. Weeks dragged into months. News crews set up outside their house. Detectives searched every lead, yet nothing solid surfaced. Her picture stayed on the evening news, her name repeated endlessly, but still the trail went cold. And so, Hannah Parker's last known moment remained frozen in time. A 14-year-old girl stepping off a school bus on a quiet October afternoon, waving to a friend, and vanishing into the silence of Millwood streets. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And soon years had passed without a single trace of Hannah Parker. What began as a frantic search across Millwood slowly transformed into an open wound the town never truly healed from. At first, the case dominated headlines. News crews parked outside the Parker home, shoving microphones toward grieving parents, asking the same questions again and again. Do you think she's alive? Do you believe she'll come back? But as time wore on and no answers came, reporters left, cameras turned off, and Hannah's face stopped appearing on the evening news. For her family, however, the nightmare never ended. Her mother, Janet, refused to let the world forget. Every year on October 12th, she organized a candlelight vigil at the park. She kept Hannah's room exactly as it had been that morning in 2005, sheets tucked tightly, posters still taped on the wall, sketchbooks piled on the desk. To Janet, it wasn't a shrine. It was a promise. She believed, with an unshakable certainty, that her daughter was still out there waiting to be found. Her father, Greg, bore the weight differently. He carried guilt like a shadow. He blamed himself for not picking her up that day, for not insisting she call him before leaving the bus stop. The burden hollowed him out. Friends noticed he stopped laughing. He stopped showing up at church. He withdrew into silence, working longer hours just to avoid walking past her empty room at night. Caleb, her older brother, tried to bury his pain under anger. He fought with classmates who whispered rumors. He pushed away teachers who tried to comfort him. By the time he graduated, he carried resentment toward the town, toward the police, even toward himself. Meanwhile, Sophie, her younger sister, grew up in the long shadow of a mystery. People often introduced her as Hannah's sister, not Sophie, and every birthday, every holiday, was clouded by the absence of the girl who should have been there. The police investigation stretched thin. Detectives chased every tip. A neighbor who thought they saw a strange van, a trucker who swore he picked up a hitchhiker matching her description, a woman in another state claiming she might be Hannah. Each lead fizzled, each hope extinguished. Potential suspects were interrogated, alibis checked, but nothing ever stuck. Evidence remained scarce. With no body, no witness, and no crime scene, the trail froze. Over the years, the case file thickened with reports but grew colder with every page. Officers retired, new ones inherited the puzzle, but the outcome never changed. Eventually, locals stopped mentioning Hannah in daily conversation. New families moved to Millwood, unaware of the ghost story woven into its streets. Children played near Pinewood Drive again. Neighbors returned to unlocked doors. The world moved forward. But the Parkers did not. For Janet, each day was a battle against despair. She posted flyers long after others told her it was useless. She joined online forums for families of missing children, sharing Hannah's photo with strangers, pleading for someone to remember anything. Every phone call jolted her heart, every knock on the door carried the possibility of news. For Greg it was the opposite. He avoided conversations, avoided hope, because hope had betrayed him too many times. He lived in silence, carrying grief like a weight he could never set down. As the years stretched into a decade, friends who once sat beside Hannah on the school bus grew older. They got jobs, married, had children. Yet whenever they passed her photo on the bulletin board inside the police station, they felt the sting of time frozen. Hannah remained 14 forever, her face unchanged, her story unfinished, while theirs carried on. By 2015 the case was labeled inactive. Not closed, not solved, just frozen in limbo. For the Parker family that word, inactive, felt like betrayal. It meant the world had given up, even if they hadn't. And then, almost 18 years after Hannah vanished, something shifted. In early 2023, the FBI's Cold Case Division received an anonymous tip. A man's voice, trembling, called into their regional office. He claimed to have information about the girl who disappeared from Millwood in 2005. Agents who took the call knew the case well. It had circulated across national databases for years, but they had learned to temper expectations. False tips were common. Cranks, hoaxers, people seeking attention. But something about this caller was different. He gave details that had never been made public. Details only someone close to the truth could possibly know. The Bureau reopened the file. They contacted the Millwood Police Department, dusted off boxes of evidence, and pulled out every note, every photograph, every sketch of Pinewood Drive. They re-interviewed witnesses long since moved away, cross-referenced old suspects with new databases, and ran background checks on names that had faded into the margins of reports. For Janet it was the first glimmer of hope in years. She had prayed every day for a break, for someone to remember something. For Greg, the news reopened wounds he had worked so hard to numb. He didn't know if he could survive another disappointment. Millwood buzzed with whispers again. Neighbors who hadn't spoken Hannah's name in years suddenly recalled moments, clues, suspicions. Old theories resurfaced. Some said the police had botched the original investigation. Others whispered that Hannah had been closer than anyone realized all along. 18 years of silence and suddenly, movement. The FBI's presence rattled the town, bringing back a storm many believed had long passed. Agents set up in the county building, combing through documents late into the night. Black SUVs parked outside neighborhoods that had long forgotten flashing lights. The Parker family clung to every update. Sophie, now grown, begged agents for answers. Caleb, hardened by time, demanded accountability. Janet prayed harder. Greg stayed quiet, staring out the window as if expecting to see his daughter walk up the driveway after all these years. The FBI was patient, methodical, deliberate. They knew the cost of raising false hope. But the deeper they dug, the clearer it became. The anonymous caller hadn't lied. Something had always been hidden. Something close, something overlooked. And in 2023, nearly 2 decades after Hannah Parker vanished from a school bus stop, investigators were finally ready to uncover what lay buried in the shadows of Millwood. 18 years after Hannah Parker vanished, the FBI finally broke through the silence that had gripped Millwood. For nearly 2 decades, her case had been a frozen story, a headline collecting dust in archives. But in the spring of 2023, agents followed the anonymous tip that had reignited the search. And what they uncovered left the entire community reeling. The investigation began quietly. Agents sifted through old witness statements, cross-referenced vehicle registrations, and pulled records from properties near Pinewood Drive. One address caught their attention, an unassuming 2-story house less than 3 miles from Hannah's last known location. The man who lived there, a local handyman named Richard Hale, had never been considered a serious suspect. In 2005 he was known as helpful, friendly, the kind of neighbor who fixed fences without asking for payment. Nobody suspected him of anything sinister. But when agents revisited his file, inconsistencies surfaced. He had been questioned once, briefly, yet his alibi, helping a friend on the other side of town, had never been fully verified. That detail might have remained overlooked forever, if not for the new caller who mentioned a locked basement where the girl never saw daylight. With search warrants in hand, FBI teams moved in. They expected to find records, maybe evidence long hidden. What they discovered shook them to their core. Behind the neat exterior of Hale's home, past tidy rooms filled with ordinary furniture, agents uncovered a concealed doorway leading to a reinforced basement. The walls were soundproofed, windows sealed, and locks designed to keep someone inside rather than intruders out. And there, alive, was Hannah Parker. 18 years older. Pale, thin, eyes wide with disbelief as agents entered. She had lived in darkness for nearly 2 decades, a prisoner just miles from where her life had once been normal. When they called her by name, she collapsed into tears, whispering words she had carried in silence for so long. "I thought no one would ever find me." The revelation stunned the town. A girl thought lost forever had been alive all along, hidden in plain sight. The FBI transported her to safety, medical teams rushing to examine her frail condition. The community that once mourned her as dead now struggled to process that she had endured years of captivity. Hale, the man everyone trusted, was immediately arrested. Neighbors watched in shock as agents led him away in handcuffs. To them, he had always been harmless, a quiet man who mowed his lawn, waved politely, and offered to fix broken gutters. Parents who once allowed their children near him now felt sick, realizing he had harbored a nightmare behind his walls. In interviews, Hannah revealed fragments of her captivity. On that October afternoon in 2005, Hale had lured her toward his truck near Pinewood Drive. He had spoken gently, pretending he needed help with something. When she hesitated, he forced her inside. She was terrified, too shocked to scream. By the time the bus had disappeared from view, she was already gone. He drove her to his home and locked her in the basement, where she remained hidden year after year. The soundproofing ensured her cries never reached the outside world. He brought her food, books, even a television at times, but her freedom was never returned. He manipulated her, convincing her escape was impossible, that nobody was searching, that if she ran, worse would come. The cruelest detail, she had been so close. Less than 3 miles from her family's home. While search parties scoured forests and rivers, Hannah remained trapped in the shadows of a familiar neighborhood. The truth shattered the Parker family. Janet collapsed when agents delivered the news, overcome with relief and sorrow for the years stolen. Greg wept for the first time in public, guilt and gratitude colliding in equal measure. Caleb clenched his fists in anger, blaming himself again for not seeing what had been there all along. Sophie, who had grown from a child into an adult without her sister, trembled at the thought that Hannah had never been gone. She had been imprisoned while the world lived on. For the community, the betrayal cut deep. Hale had attended church, fixed porches, even babysat children. He had lived among them, unsuspected, while hiding a girl everyone searched for. Parents who once trusted him now looked back with horror, wondering how many times their children had been near the very house that contained a nightmare. The FBI detailed the conditions Hannah endured: years without sunlight, meals brought at irregular times, threats that kept her silent. Yet despite it all, she survived. She never stopped believing that one day she might be discovered. That sliver of hope carried her through nearly 2 decades of captivity. As Hale's arrest made headlines nationwide, Millwood became the center of attention again. Reporters flooded back, microphones pressed against the Parker family's lawn. But this time the story wasn't about a missing child, it was about a survivor. The FBI revealed that the anonymous tip had come from a former acquaintance of Hale's, someone who had grown suspicious after years of strange behavior. That suspicion finally led to courage, and that courage saved Hannah's life. The town that once whispered theories now faced the grim reality: the monster had been their neighbor all along. A man who smiled at the grocery store, waved from his driveway, and lived a double life nobody imagined possible. And Hannah Parker, who had been a frightened girl stepping off a bus in 2005, was found alive in 2023, carrying scars that would never fully fade, but also carrying strength no one could take from her. Millwood would never forget the betrayal. Families learned to look closer, to question what seemed ordinary. The Parker family began the painful process of healing, knowing the years could never be returned but grateful their daughter was alive. And as Richard Hale sat in a prison cell awaiting trial, the town asked itself the haunting question: if a girl could disappear in broad daylight and live hidden for 18 years behind the walls of a neighbor's house, what other secrets might be hiding in plain sight? The news spread like wildfire. After 18 years, the missing teenager who had vanished from the yellow bus steps was finally walking into her family's arms. But time had not stood still. She was no longer the bright-eyed girl in a school uniform clutching her books. She was a woman shaped by silence, by captivity, and by the long shadow of fear. When the FBI car pulled up in front of her parents' modest home, neighbors gathered, unable to believe what they were about to witness. Curtains moved, front doors opened, whispers floated through the street. Her mother stood frozen on the porch, clutching the railing with trembling hands. Her father stood beside her, shoulders bent, eyes brimming with both hope and terror. And then the door opened. The woman stepped out slowly, almost cautiously, as though unsure if she was allowed to touch the air of freedom. Her hair fell in uneven lengths, her frame thinner than it should have been. Her eyes scanned the faces before her, searching, measuring, fighting the disbelief that this moment was real. Her mother broke first. With a cry that sounded like years of grief unraveling all at once, she ran forward, wrapping her arms around her daughter as though trying to hold together the 18 years they had lost. Her father followed, his strong hands trembling as he touched her face, as if to convince himself she wasn't a ghost. But the reunion was not the fairy tale ending people expected. It was raw. It was heavy. The years stolen could not be returned, and the scars of captivity lingered in every quiet pause, in every careful glance. She hugged her parents back, but her embrace carried hesitation, as though she was still trapped between two worlds, the one she was stolen from and the one she was forced into. The cameras captured tears, cheers, and applause. Yet beneath the surface, there was a silence no lens could record. A silence that came from the weight of everything unsaid, birthdays missed, holidays empty, and laughter replaced by unanswered prayers. Her younger brother, now a grown man, approached slowly. He had been a child when she disappeared. His memories of her were of games in the yard, late-night talks, and the way she always defended him at school. Now, standing taller than their father, he reached for her hand, his voice breaking as he whispered, "You came back." She nodded, eyes glistening, but words failed her. Inside the house, photographs lined the walls. Pictures of her from the years before 2005, frozen at 15, smiling in a world she would never return to. She stared at them, tears running down her face, realizing that while she had lived 18 years in darkness, her family had lived 18 years keeping her alive only through memories. The town celebrated, but behind closed doors the family faced a difficult truth. The girl who had vanished was gone. In her place stood a woman marked by survival. She carried stories she could not yet share, secrets too painful to voice. Nights were restless. Small sounds startled her. Freedom itself felt unfamiliar. Her parents, filled with joy, also carried grief. They had dreamed for years of her safe return, but reality was different from imagination. She had been returned, but the time they lost was irretrievable. Her father often sat in silence, staring at the walls, haunted by guilt that he hadn't protected her. Her mother whispered prayers at night, begging for healing that only time could offer. The FBI released details in fragments. She had been held in a basement less than 15 miles from her childhood home. For nearly 2 decades, she had been hidden in plain sight, while the community searched the woods, the rivers, and distant cities. The abductor had been someone trusted, someone seen at barbecues, someone who waved at neighbors. That truth shook the town to its core. People wondered how they had missed the signs, how they had allowed a predator to live among them unnoticed. But for the woman, the past did not need to be explained in reports or headlines. She had lived it. She had survived it. And now, standing in the home she once ran through barefoot, she struggled to connect the memories of her childhood with the reality of her present. Her survival was not just a return, it was a testament to endurance, to resilience, to the human spirit's refusal to be erased. She was no longer the girl who vanished in 2005. She was someone new, someone forged in silence but still standing. In time, she began walking the neighborhood streets again, her steps slow but deliberate. Some people embraced her with open arms. Others stared with a mixture of pity and unease, unsure of how to approach someone who had lived a nightmare so close to home. Her family chose not to hide her story. They wanted people to know the truth, that evil can hide in ordinary faces, that dangers can lurk where you least expect, and that hope, even when it feels impossible, can sometimes be rewarded. She attended therapy. She joined survivor groups. She learned to speak about what had happened, not with ease but with bravery. Each word spoken was another chain broken. Each tear shed was another wound allowed to heal. But the most powerful moment came months later. She visited her old school, now filled with new students who only knew her name from whispers and newspaper clippings. Standing in front of them, she told her story, not in full detail but in enough to teach a lesson. Evil hides in silence. Never stop speaking up. Never stop searching. Never stop believing. The room was quiet, her voice steady, and in that silence she gave back what had been taken from her. Her voice, her power, her presence. She returned after 18 years, but not as the girl who vanished. She came back as proof that even in the darkest corners, light can survive. Her journey is not just about what was stolen, it's about what endured. And it's about us, what we choose to see, what we choose to believe, and how we choose to fight for those who disappear. Because sometimes, the ones we think are gone forever, still find their way home. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect on resilience, on hope, and on the hidden battles people face every day, subscribe to this channel. We bring you real stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Don't just watch, be part of the journey.